What exactly would the Inflation Reduction Act do to reduce inflation in the short term?
So when you look at the lowering costs in particular for Americans, I think that's important when you think about how inflation has increased costs for Americans. Down in the U.S. economy, as I just stated moments ago, overall prices have been essentially flat in our country these last 2 months. That is welcome news for American families, with more work still to do, as the administration did with the leadership of this president. This month, we saw some welcome moderation in the price increases for food at the grocery store. It's moderating, which is important.
Over the weekend, the vice president said that the border is secure.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border is secure?
We have a secure border.
But we're on track to close the fiscal year with 2 million encounters, breaking last year's record last month. So how is the border secure?
Look, as far as the border, we're taking unprecedented action. We had to fix something that was broken, especially by the last administration. We've secured record levels. This is what we have been able to do, of funding for the Department of Homeland Security. Remember, many Republicans voted against that. Many of them who would like to invite me to the border have actually voted against that. Compare that to the Trump administration, which largely just tried to build a wall, an ineffective wall along the border, and couldn't even finish that in 4 years. We're certainly doing a lot more to secure the border, and could be doing even more if Republicans would stop their obstruction. That's it. I'm going to just take one last. I'm actually breaking the rule here. I'm taking one last question. Go ahead, Tam. Just one last question.
On the inflation report that came out today, the president is promising the Inflation Reduction Act will do just that and bring down costs. But this bill does not address food or housing, prices of which we are seeing going up. So what is your message to Americans who are seeing these rising costs? And are you confident that you're doing enough to finally bring these down?
So look, the president has said for some time now, when it comes to his number one economic priority is to deal with inflation, is to make sure that we are lowering costs for American people, for American families, Americans who have to come around the table, once a month in particular, to figure out how are they going to pay those bills. Again, this is why the event that we're having in less than 45 minutes to celebrate and talk about, you'll hear from the president about the Inflation Reduction Act, is so critical. That is why Democrats and this president did the hard work to get that done, is to lower costs on. Look, but we understand that there is more work to do, and that is something that we are very, very focused on as well. The more work that we have to do to get this more down, costs are down for American families.
But this bill doesn't address groceries or rent. So how long should Americans expect those prices to remain high?
So look, we're going to do everything that we can to lower prices.
While an administration certainly has the opportunity to celebrate achievements like legislation, is there any concern that there's a dissonance between the current economic moment and the kind of celebration you'll have this afternoon on the South Lawn about the Inflation Reduction Act, when today's figures show that inflation is still a great concern, when we've talked about the Amtrak situation and so forth? Is there a disconnect there?
So I think if we look at the picture more broadly about what this means, because we have to remember the Inflation Reduction Act is historic. If you think about how electeds like the president and Democrats on Congress, other Democrats for decades, it's a huge win for the American people. We understand, and I've said this many times, the president has said this many times, that there's more work to do. You think about the Infrastructure Reduction Act, that's going to create. That is a huge deal. That is what the Inflation Reduction Act does. Which is only part of the Americans' economic plan. The president's economic plan. So yes, we think it's important because this is a huge win for the American people. Again, we understand that there's more work to do, but we have to understand that the Inflation Reduction Act, it is a historic piece of legislation. It is going to make it's going to be a big deal for families, change their lives.
The President's Emergency Board didn't just create a framework, it proposed recommendations. Recommendations accepted by 10 of the unions and the companies. two unions that are talking about the dispute have not accepted these recommendations. What's the president's view of those recommendations? Is he urging them to accept the recommendations before Friday's deadline?
So I'm not going to get ahead of the conversations that are happening right now. What we are saying is we want to continue to see the good faith. We believe that the negotiations, the conversations.
The specific issue is a question of the workers' rights to take time off. They say that they should have the right to call in sick, pay respects to their relatives when they want to take bereavement, and they're not able to do that. Is the president sympathetic to that? Because that's the primary issue here.
Yeah, so as you know, the president strongly supports collective bargaining, encourages them to continue to negotiate at the table in good faith.
Given the potential risk of harm, is the president prepared to sign a bill enacting the recommendations of the president's emergency board?
So look, the rail companies, we have to remember that they are, and the unions have worked out agreements in previous negotiations. This is not the first time, and they can do this again. So we are